Hi, I just wanted to talk a little bit today about some common mistakes while tracking your macros. So, to start, this is kind of a caveat of what I talked about on Friday about food being amoral, that it neither has a behavior of good or bad. There's not good or bad food, but our body takes whatever we eat, whatever we consume, and it uses those calories, whether they're derived from proteins, from the carbs, or from the fats. So our body is going to use it however it's made of, regardless if we think this is good or bad. Yes, there's food that is more nutrient dense, which is better for you because it's going to make you feel fuller longer. It's going to give you whole proteins. It's going to, satiate you. Whereas if you eat like simple carbs, it's going to be short, you're not going to feel full, and you'll be hungry and wanting to eat more and then go over your calories. So, a common mistake is, labeling our foods good and bad when we can really utilize them as carbs, proteins, and fats. So, on those days, like I had shared a picture of eggs for breakfast with a donut. The eggs were the protein that hit that protein mark, and that donut is your carbs and your fats. Maybe it's not the most nutrient dense, complex carbohydrate, it's not, but you're still living life. Your family's eating donuts. You can have one. Just make it balanced. But in addition to that, of what's not focusing on things being bad, but sometimes we also get back into the mind frame of different diets we've been on where they're like, you can have as much fruit as possible, like whenever you want. Eat the fruit, eat all the vegetables all the time, not realizing that so many of those have so many calories. And so if you are trying to stay in a calorie deficit, but you are continuously eating stuff full of calories, you're going to be going over that deficit and not seeing the results you want to be, whether it's fat loss or maintaining your weight. I mean, that would be helpful if you're trying to gain. But I would say most of us are not trying to gain weight. Some of us maybe to gain more muscle. But I don't think most of us are trying to gain fat. So it's important to understand that all the food that we consume has calories, and all of those calories are derived of macronutrients, which are protein, carbs, and fats, and that they're going to add up. So it's important to know that yes, fruits and vegetables are much better because of the nutrients that have in them, but sometimes that Oreo cookie is going to fit just fine within there. It's a carb and a fat. So don't overdo it, and don't forget to track everything that you eat. Another macro mistake is not tracking your food. That's a big, huge problem in macros. And that means tracking like everything, especially when you're in a cut. When you're in a calorie deficit, which you only really need to be in for maybe 6 to 8 weeks is getting that big cut. That's when you should be in that calorie deficit. And that's when you really, really want to focus on every single thing that you are consuming. Because when you leave things out, those still are calories that you're unaccounting for. And so you're getting this false sense that you are in a deficit and you're not. So if you forget to add, oh, I had ketchup with that, or I forgot to add the pickles, but how big of a deal is that? If we have that mentality when we're tracking, then you are going to miss a lot of things. And those calories are still there, even if you don't input them. And it's not to be such a ball and chain that tracking, even though sometimes it really is, it's just to kind of give you an awareness of how much you do consume. So big mistake is not inputting everything, especially when you're in a cut. Sometimes you can't. And We'll talk later about being, in a cut for fat loss or gain or maintenance. Maintenance is going to be something we talk about later, which is a really important part where you're not always so strict on your calories. But until then, when you do have a goal, you need to make sure that you're tracking pretty precisely. And that's why I emphasized weighing your meat when it's raw and tracking it that way, just so you're getting the right amount of protein and calories inputted, fats, carbs, so that you are really hitting your macros. So in addition to that, I'm going to post a few different examples of what's considered, what people consider a healthy breakfast, whereas something that's unhealthy, when really the calories are way higher in that healthy breakfast than the not so healthy breakfast, that we have branded that. And so sometimes we could eat that thing that we wanted, but we opted for this because we thought it was better. So, and sometimes it is. Sometimes you need to eat that healthy breakfast, but sometimes you can have that bowl of cereal and not beat yourself up over it. Another mistake is not getting your water intake. It is very important to drink your water every day. Hit that every single day. Your body needs the water to break things down. It needs it to function. There is, and I think some people will debate this too, but people are totally against being able to get any water from your soda or your juice or whatever, and it has water in it. That does count toward your water intake. I wouldn't suggest just drinking soda or diet soda, or juice is so high in calories that you drink a few things of juice and you might be done for the day. But as you would think, diet soda, it's probably not the best thing for you. It's better to get pure water, but that still counts. So, and that's, some people are like, no, don't tell me that. But I just say keep things in moderation. I have a daughter who has a bit of a Dr. Pepper problem. And so we have kind of limited her weekend drinking. It's her weekend drinking. So she can drink some Dr. Pepper on the weekend. So maybe don't have soda as your main source of water, but it's okay to have soda. It is. But again, you are trying to make sure you understand the calories and what you're intaking. Another macro mistake is measuring out in volume instead of weight. So it's best, if you can, to weigh everything and not to just weigh it as in with measuring cups and spoons, because you can kind of cheat there a little bit. So sometimes, try it for yourself, even with like your protein powder. If you've ever weighed the scoop, sometimes it comes out differently. So to be really precise is use a scale, a food scale. Will really go a long way. Another thing to avoid is kind of a generic measurement and I see this in MyFitnessPal, where it will say 1 medium avocado. This again goes back to weighing and measuring. 1 medium avocado is going to be, medium, and it gives you generic calories, and it's not very precise. And so your medium could be my small, or my large could be your medium. So it's really, really important to weigh your food. It's really important. And like I have said before, grams are kind of the preferred way to measure it because it's just a lot more precise. Another macro mistake that you can make is if you're using like MyFitnessPal, is let's say you went to a restaurant and had shrimp tacos and you just kind of put in a generic one. It's really hard when it's at a restaurant. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes it's super hard to find something that matches exactly right. But if you are, let's say if you are cooking at home and you made shrimp tacos and you're just like, I just really don't want to measure everything out. Again, it's better to do it. If you can do it while you're cooking is ideal, and scan each barcode and be more precise instead of just trying to hope, put in bulk information. And a lot of the entries in MyFitnessPal are incorrect. For example, whenever we go to like the Mexican restaurant and they put those free chips and salsa, and it's so hard not to eat them because they're there or to overeat them. Well, I had found something in it was like saying an exact number of chips. And so I was like, oh, that sounds pretty great. And it was like it was like, that might be fudging a little bit. But I was like, okay with it. But then, and so I had inputted it and I was like, this is great. But then I wasn't hitting my macros because I wasn't getting the carbs that I thought I was getting. And when I looked into the entry, it only had the calories. It just said 140 calories, for example. It definitely, chips and salsa are not that low. But let's say it said 140 calories, but the carbs were 0, the proteins were 0, and the fats were 0. So somebody somewhere had inputted that because they just wanted to track their calories and not their macros. And so it was incorrect. So if at the end of the day, if you're hitting your calories, your macros should be pretty perfect because they should all add up to that. So if something is not matching up, it's probably because of one of those entries that you put in MyFitnessPal. Something that is very helpful, I wouldn't say it's a mistake to track as you go. Most of the time, that's what I do. I track as I go. But a good hint is to pre-plan your day. It makes it so much easier to track your macros that way. And it literally takes less time than you think. Because throughout the day, if you're tracking, you have to pull out your phone, you have to kind of input and, here, there, and there little. If you can pre-plan your day by, prepping your meals or knowing what you're going to eat, you can input that in the day before, and then okay, this is what I'm going to eat. Like, oh, what time is it? I'm hungry, but it's not quite lunchtime. What am I eating for lunch? I'm going to pull something from that lunch and eat it now, or I'm going to eat one of my snacks now. And that way, what's coming up, what you're going to get, and you're going to hit your macros at the end of the day if you follow that pre-plan. So if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. So plan ahead, pre-plan if you can. That is like some of the best advice that I can give you, that I don't always follow myself, but when I do, it's a much smoother day. And yet another macro mistake is eyeballing things. Looking at something and kind of guessing like, I feel like that's about that. Because most times you are completely off. You're completely off. You're either going to overdo it or underdo it. The best way is to measure, especially when you are tracking hard and trying to do a cut and have a goal in mind, is do not eyeball it. Do not. If you can help it, weigh your food. We have talked about, weighing it meat raw, or you know, and then making sure your macros are correct there. It's just make sure you input it correctly. Let's say you did weigh it raw and you input chicken, and that chicken in MyFitnessPal or whatever app you use is cooked, it's going to be different. So ideally, you want to scan straight from the package that is raw, measure it, input it raw, then cook it. That's a big, big macro mistake. But if you have it cooked, look for the cooked or do the conversion of it. So you know this was 112 calories. This was 112 grams when it was raw. Now it is 88. So make sure I inputted that. So you know the calories you're getting, them and the macros that you're getting. Another macro mistake is not tracking everything. Meaning like, oh, I just had a taste of that. Or I just had like 3 grapes. Like, that doesn't really matter. Or it's making sure that you don't forget to track all of those things, because all of those do add up. They really do. Even that little tiny taste of your kid's ice cream. Maybe keep that one off. Okay, another mistake you can make is a lot of times if you are trying to lose fat, and let's say at the end of the day, you've hit your calories, you're in your deficit, but you are over in one and under in the other two. What do I do? Do I eat something to get these all balanced, or do I stay where I am and stay in my calorie deficit? If your goal is fat loss, absolutely stop where you are and stay under your calories. The deficit is going to help you to lose the fat. And then the next day, pre-plan, work harder to hit and get that balance of those macros. So I always say calorie deficit first. This is for fat loss. Calorie deficit first. Try to hit your protein every single day. The other two, carbs and fats, will fall into place, but try to do that. Okay, another macro mistake is giving up counting and tracking your macros. I know it can be overwhelming. I know it can be just too much, but give it a chance. A lot of people give up because it was just too much. They put in a whole week and they didn't see any results, and that's frustrating. Fat loss takes time. It really does. We live in this world of instant gratification, and weight loss doesn't work like that. I wish it did. If you see somebody lose weight in a week or something, that's usually they're just losing water weight. They're not losing fat. If you want to lose fat, it takes time. Be patient. Trust the process. With macros, and once you've done the MacroZinc calculator and figured out your macros, try not to change your macros very often. You're like, oh, this isn't working for me. I'm going to try it again. Give it time. Give your body time to adjust to those calories and adjust to the process. You want to, you're eventually going to get into maintenance where those calories will bump back up, but give yourself some time. You want to do something that can sustain you, that you don't feel like you're starving all the time, but don't tweak it yourself. Don't try to tweak it. Trust the process. I think we talked about this when I talked about how to input in MyFitnessPal, is don't eat your exercise calories. Don't worry about those. When you did the MacroZinc calculator, it calculated into your lifestyle what you put. If you put you were sedentary but worked out 2 to 3 times a week, that's taking all of that into account. So in your MyFitnessPal, you might want to track your calories. I like to track calories just to say, like, man, that was a great work. I worked really hard, but I never eat those calories. So don't eat your exercise calories that you burned. That's already calculated within the macros calculator. So don't eat those calories, okay? Okay. All right, guys, hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, please start writing down your questions, asking Lake and I your questions. We're planning to have a question and answer day coming up soon this month. It's the 19th. We're more than halfway through this. I'm hoping some of you are getting some good education and knowledge from this. Let us know. This is our first rodeo doing this and sharing this information. So we would love any feedback. Thanks, guys.